আসসালামু আলাইকুম সবাইকে স্বাগতম। আজকের এক্সিস মেডিকেল দ্বারা আয়োজিত আমাদের সিজন চলছে বিল্ডিং দ্য রাইট ফাউন্ডেশনের এপিসোড 4। সবাইকে অনেক অনেক স্বাগতম এবং আজকের এই সেশনটা কিন্তু অনেক বেশি ইন্টারেস্টিং হতে যাচ্ছে, সো একদমই মিস করা যাবে না। অনেক তাড়াতাড়ি সবাই জয়েন করে ফেলুন এবং আপনাদের ফ্রেন্ডদেরকে সবাইকে মেনশন করে দিন যেন সবাই এই সেশনটাতে উপস্থিত থাকে, কারণ এটা একটা খুবই ইম্পর্ট্যান্ট একটা টপিক আমাদের সবার জন্য। সো আজকের টপিকটা হচ্ছে আপার জিআই ব্লিড এবং আমাদের সাথে আছেন একজন খুবই ট্যালেন্টেড এবং অ্যামেজিং মেন্টর, ডক্টর কাজী বদরুদ্দোজা ভাইয়া, FCPS অন মেডিসিন স্পেশালিস্ট, স্কয়ার হসপিটাল লিমিটেড। আসসালামু আলাইকুম ভাইয়া, কেমন আছেন?
ওয়ালাইকুম আসসালাম, আমি ভালো আছি, আশা করি বাকি সবাই ভালো আছে। তো আমরা আমাদের আজকের যে টপিক প্রেজেন্টেশন আপার গ্যাস্ট্রোইন্টেস্টাইনাল ব্লিডিং, এটা আমার মনে হয় আমরা এখন শুরু করতে পারি। পার্টিসিপেন্টরা অন দ্য ওয়ে জয়েন করতে পারে আর কি। তো আজকের টপিক খুব ইম্পর্টেন্ট টপিক এই কারণে যে এটা হচ্ছে যে ফাইট অর ফ্লাইট রেসপন্স আর কি। আমাদের এটা হচ্ছে এমন একটা কন্ডিশন যেটার জন্য হচ্ছে ইউ হ্যাভ টু বি ভিজিল্যান্ট every moment, every second. If you are not properly vigilant, then adverse outcomes can happen for the patient, which we do not want as medical professionals. আমার কথা কি প্রপারলি শোনা যাচ্ছে? So this is the presentation. আমার একটু পরিচয় দিয়ে দিই, আমি হচ্ছে ডক্টর কাজী বদরুদ্দোজা।
শোনা যাচ্ছে। আমরা যারা আর পার্টিসিপেন্টস আছি, আমি সবাইকে রিকোয়েস্ট করব
রাইট। আমার মনে হয় সবাই যারা আছেন পার্টিসিপেন্ট তাদের হচ্ছে মাইক্রোফোনটা মিউট করে রাখলে আমার কথাটা সবার শুনতে একটু সুবিধা হবে আর কি। আমি হচ্ছে আজকের প্রেজেন্টেশন, এটা একটা বেসিক্যালি ভাস্ট টপিক, এন্ড মেডিকেল সায়েন্সের যে কোনো টপিকের ব্যাপারে যেটা হয়, আমার একটা টপিক ইট পুলস অন টু মেনি আদার টপিকস। আমার কোনো ডিজিজ অথবা কোনো কন্ডিশনটা একটা সিঙ্গুলার কন্ডিশন না, এটা ম্যানেজমেন্ট, একটা হিস্ট্রি, প্রেজেন্টেশন, ম্যানেজমেন্ট, এইসব যেগুলো অ্যাসপেক্ট আছে প্রত্যেকটা জিনিস হচ্ছে মেডিকেল সায়েন্সে দেখা যায় অন্যান্য টপিকগুলো সম্পর্কে, অন্যান্য বিভিন্ন অ্যাসপেক্ট সম্পর্কে একটা ওভারঅল নলেজ থাকতে হয়। আফটার দ্যাট ইউ উইল বি এবল টু প্রপারলি ম্যানেজ দ্য পেশেন্ট। মানে আমি শুধু আপার জিআই ব্লিডিং মানে হচ্ছে শুধুমাত্র ব্লিডিং এর ম্যানেজমেন্ট কিভাবে শিখতে হবে, এই জাস্ট নট দিস। এটা হচ্ছে আমার, যেমন আমি যখন ম্যানেজ করবো, আমরা যখন ম্যানেজমেন্ট এর ওই জায়গাগুলোতে যাবো, তখন দেখা যাবে যে ম্যানেজমেন্টের অ্যাসপেক্ট গুলো, ওই প্রত্যেকটা অ্যাসপেক্টে কাকে কি দিব না দিব, এই ধরনের বিভিন্ন ধরনের ব্যাপার স্যাপার আছে। তো এরকম কোরিলেশনাল একটা এডুকেশন থাকলে তখন একটা পেশেন্ট ম্যানেজ করা খুবই ইজি হয় আর কি। তো আমরা আজকে মোটামুটি ওই জিনিসটাই ট্রাই করবো আর কি। আর এর মধ্যে যদি কারোর কোনো কোশ্চেন থাকে, হোপফুলি দেয়ার উইল বি সাম কোশ্চেন, I would expect that there will be some questions. আমি মনে হয় এই কোশ্চেনগুলো আমাদের যে চ্যাট বক্স আছে, চ্যাট বক্সে ড্রপ করে দিলে আমরা হচ্ছে এই কোশ্চেনগুলোর অ্যানসার দেওয়ার ট্রাই করব আর কি। ওকে, সো লেটস স্টার্ট। আপার জিআই ব্লিডিং আমরা একটা কেস দিয়ে শুরু করি। এটা হচ্ছে একটা টিপিক্যাল সিনারিও, যেমন হচ্ছে একটা সে মিসেস ব্রাউন, who is a 70-year-old lady, arrived in the accident and emergency department by ambulance on a Saturday night along with her son. The son tells you that she vomited blood earlier that evening and then collapsed. And the patient says, well, I had not been feeling well all evening. Then I was watching the TV when I started feeling sick and dizzy. So I went to the bathroom and threw up everywhere. When I saw that it was just blood, I was terrified. I yelled for my son, get to him, but then I started feeling even dizzier. And the next thing I knew, I was on the floor and my son was beside me calling for an ambulance. Now, if this is the case that you see in the emergency department, how would you, who is a resident in the emergency department or SHO, how would we approach to manage this patient? So through this presentation, we will try to address the issues of this lady, and we'll try to cover the basis of those management directions. Okay. Now, what will you do first thing? This is an emergency scenario. The patient has collapsed. Any collapsed patient, any accident emergency patient, you will have to go through the ABCDE approach. Now, the details of the ABCD approach is not given in the slides. A is airway. You will make sure the airway is patent and the patient is able to protect it. If she is not, if the patient is not being able to protect her airway, I mean, the patient with massive bleedings, those patients uh, can have altered sensoria, can have loss of consciousness, can be restless or agitated. Those patients can aspirate. Those patients may not be able to protect their airway properly. That's the extreme cases. I mean, most cases the patients are able to communicate and able to protect the airway. But if those extreme cases are the cases you are going to handle, you will have to intubate these patients to ensure that the patient's airway is protected. Okay. Now there's B. You will have to ensure that the patient is breathing properly. If he is not or she is not, then you have to go through the BLS or ACLS cycle. And then there is C, the circulation. This is the most important thing to consider here. As the patient is losing blood, the patient is, I mean, it's upper GI bleeding. I mean, it's bleeding from the upper gastrointestinal tract. I mean, upper gastrointestinal tract starts from the mouth and ends at the ligament of Treves. I mean, this is a ligament that you will find in your anatomy book. Ligament of Treves is the suspensory ligament of the duodenum that has two parts, one from the duodenum and another from the right cross of the diaphragm. This ligament separates the upper GI from the lower GI. If the bleeding is coming from the above this ligament, it is attached to the fourth part of the duodenum, and it is attached at the duodenojejunal. This marks the duodenojejunal flexure. If the bleeding comes from the above this ligament, then it's the upper GI bleeding, and if the bleeding comes from lower than that ligament, it's termed as lower GI bleeding. And in most scenarios, the upper GI bleeding and lower GI bleeding, this cannot be separated in a straightforward way. I mean, if the patient presents just with melena or hematochezia, I mean, you're not right away sure if the bleeding is coming from the upper GI tract or the lower GI tract, but still it's bleeding. The patient is losing blood. The patient's volume status is going down. So you have to check for the circulation. I mean, there are ways that you can check for the circulations. If the circulation is adequate, if the patient volume status is adequate, we are going to discuss these in details in the coming slides. And then the neurological status, D, disability, neurological status of the patient. The patient's neurological status, as I have mentioned, can be altered if the patient has lost a significant amount of blood, and if the patient has lost the blood for a quite considerable amount of time, the patient can have altered sensorium. In those cases, you have to manage those patients accordingly. And then exposure, ensure the proper exposure is ensure that there are not. I mean, this could be a traumatic case. I mean, if the patient has a stab wound through the abdomen, that's also an upper GI bleeding. That patient can present with hematemesis. So you will have to make sure that there are other areas of there are no other sources of the bleeding, and the bleeding is only through the GI tract. Okay. So these are the first few minutes. These are the first things that should come to your mind when you see a patient coming to the ER profusely bleeding. I mean, once I saw a patient who is bleeding, I mean, so profusely that the buckets are being filled with the vomited blood of the patient. We successfully managed that patient. How we're going to? I'm hoping after this presentation we'll be able to manage those cases. Now, as you go through this ABCD approach, simultaneously you will have this initial evaluation, and initial evaluation consists of history, physical examination, and laboratory tests. I mean, this circulation part comes first. I mean, you will have to check the circulation. You will have to arrange 2 large bore IV cannula in the patient in situ if the patient is in shock, in hypovolemic shock, the patient is hypotensive, and then start through resuscitation right away, even before you can take any history. But if the patient is stable enough, you can have time to take the history and do some preliminary physical examination and send the blood for laboratory tests. The goal of this initial evaluation that consists of history, physical examination, and lab tests, the goals are to assess the severity of the bleeding. I mean, how severe is the bleeding? And then identify the potential sources of the bleed. All of these questions, all of these goals will be addressed in the coming slides. And then to determine if there are conditions that present that may affect the subsequent management. So there, I mean, with these goals in mind, you will take the history. I mean, for how long the patient is bleeding. Is the patient feeling dizzy? I mean, there are questions like this that you ask the patient. What is the volume of the blood? What is the color of the blood? You will ask these questions to the patient to assess the severity and duration of the bleeding. And the color of the blood may direct us to some potential sources of bleeding. I mean, if the blood is coffee ground, then it's not coming from the esophagus, it's coming from the stomach and or lower. And if the patient is bleeding fresh blood, this can be anywhere through the GI tract. I mean, it can be nasopharyngeal or the esophageal bleeding, or it can be from the gastric varices or the bleeding peptic ulcers. Those are the sources that you should be considered. And the past history may lead us to some differential diagnosis right away. And then we'll have to determine if there are conditions that present that affect subsequent management. I mean, as I said, the volume resuscitation, I mean, the circulation and volume resuscitation is the mainstay of the management in for the resident. I mean, there are other definitive managements, but as a resident, the main thing that concerns you is the circulation, the volume status of the patient. I mean, so to resuscitate the patient, you will have to be careful that you do not over resuscitate the patient, so that in a patient that is susceptible to volume overload, you do not cause that for him or her. Okay, so the history, past medical history is very important. I mean, you will have to ask if she or he has prior episodes of upper GI bleeding. And it has been seen that 60% of the patients with upper GI bleeding has a previous prior episode of upper GI bleeding history. So it's very important. I mean, if you know right away the history that she has bled in the past, and so that means she knows from where that bleeding came from. I mean, is she susceptible to peptic ulcer disease? If this is a bleeding peptic ulcer, or she has a CLD, chronic liver disease, and decompensated chronic liver disease with gastric varices that may bleed, or total hypertensive gastropathy that may bleed. So prior episodes of upper GI bleeding and the cause of that prior episode of prior bleeding can be very important in determining your management. And then the potential bleeding sources that are suggested by a patient's past medical history might include varices. I mean, esophageal varices or gastric varices or portal hypertensive gastropathy. This can be found if the patient has liver disease or alcohol abuse. I mean, alcohol abuse will cause liver disease and then the varices. Alcohol abuse also causes bleeding through Mallory-Weiss tear. These alcoholic patients are more susceptible to there is a condition termed Mallory-Weiss tear, which will be coming up on in the next slides. So alcoholic patients are susceptible, more susceptible to those conditions. If the patient has abdominal aortic aneurysm or an aortic graft, that patient may have an aortoenteric fistula and massive hematemesis or upper classical bleeding. So these are not the cases that we see commonly, abdominal aortic aneurysm or an aortic graft, but still you are the students or the doctors that will be working all over the world. I mean, probably some of you are still students, so you don't know in which country you are gonna end up in future. So you might see cases like this. And then in renal, if the patient has renal disease, aortic stenosis, or hereditary hemorrhagic telangiectasia, those patients may have gastrointestinal angiodysplasia, which may bleed very easily. And these patients may also have multiple prior episodes of upper gastrointestinal bleeding. Peptic ulcer disease, if the patient has prior history of H. pylori infection, if the patient uses NSAIDs for any reason, I mean, if the patient has osteoarthritis or any rheumatic joint diseases or headache, they may have a history of frequent non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug uses, and those patients are susceptible to peptic ulcer diseases. Antithrombotics, I mean, antithrombotics and anticoagulants, those are the very commonly prescribed medications. Aspirin, for example, can predispose the patient to peptic ulcer disease, and it causes platelet hypofunction. I mean, it's an antiplatelet drug, so it can promote bleeding. And then the smoking, the common culprit for all the diseases that are known to humankind, smoking. The smoking causes a multitude of problems. Among them is peptic ulcer disease. It can also cause malignancy and gastrointestinal malignancy, and malignant tissue bleeds easily, very easily. Even if you touch a malignant tissue, you will see oozing blood from the tissue. Smoking, alcohol abuse, and Helicobacter pylori infection, all these conditions makes the patient prone to develop gastrointestinal malignancies, which might bleed. I mean, it can be upper or lower GI, but it's also about upper GI bleeding. And then there are marginal ulcer of the gastroenteric anastomosis. If the patient has GI bypass surgery, prior history of GI bypass surgery, and he or she probably has an anastomosis, and the ulcer may form at the margins of this anastomosis, and he or she may bleed through the ulcer. Okay. Now, there's the past medical history that can give us a clue about where the bleeding is coming from. Okay, and then comorbid illnesses that can significantly alter our management directions. Okay, if the patient has a history of coronary artery disease or pulmonary disease, these patients are more susceptible to adverse effects of anemia. I mean, these patients are already the oxygen content of this patient are already lower because the heart cannot function properly because of the coronary artery disease, and the gas exchange cannot happen properly in the lungs because she has or he has a pulmonary disease. So these patients are more susceptible to significant adverse effects of anemia. I mean, the only oxygen carrying molecule is hemoglobin. If the patient has low hemoglobin, then the patient's tissues are more susceptible to hypoxia. So these patients need to be maintained at higher hemoglobin levels. I mean, when you see a upper GI bleed patient, and the patient has history of coronary artery disease or pulmonary artery disease, I mean, the threshold for when you choose to transfuse the patient with blood products can be higher, the threshold can be lower in these cases. If the patient has renal disease or heart failure, those patients are susceptible to volume of risk. I mean, these patients may need more invasive monitoring. What is invasive monitoring? We will touch on briefly in the coming slides. And then if the patient has coagulopathy, that may cause that might be the cause of the bleeding. If the patient has thrombocytopenia, if the patient has significant hepatic dysfunction, then there might be difficult to control bleeding. I mean, we have to manage or give therapy directed to these conditions to stop the bleeding on top of the resuscitation efforts that are going on side by side. These patients may need transfusion of platelet prothrombin complex concentrate and fresh frozen plasma or platelets, along with the packed red cells that he or she might need because of the hypovolemic shock. And then if the patient has dementia and hepatic encephalopathy, these patients have difficulty protecting their airway, and these patients may have aspiration of GI contents into the lungs, and for these patients, endotracheal intubation might be necessary. There are other indications that other cases where you need to intubate the patient. We will discuss it later. And then the medication history. What is causing the bleeding? The medications may cause the bleeding. Okay. And these medications may alter our managements after the bleeding has happened. Okay. Aspirin and other NSAIDs all can cause gastrointestinal bleeding, including the COX-2 inhibitors. We suppose that COX-2 inhibitors makes the patient less prone to bleed through their upper gastrointestinal tract or gastrointestinal tract in general, but they can also cause GI bleed. Doxycycline and bisphosphonates, these are the common culprits of pill esophagitis. There is a condition termed pill esophagitis. Doxycycline and bisphosphonates, this can cause severe esophageal pain and esophagitis, and there can be bleeding from the esophagitis side. So if the patient is taking these medications, it's important in the history. Antiplatelet agents and anticoagulants, these can be the cause of the bleeding in a patient who has prior peptic ulcer disease, or this can complicate the patient management of the patient of the upper gastrointestinal bleeding. And there are other medications that are known to increase the risk, increase the chances of the upper GI bleeding. One of those are SSRIs, selective serotonin reactive inhibitors. I mean, these are kind of antidepressants. If the patient's fluoxetine is one of them. Okay, this is commonly prescribed antidepressant. Calcium channel blockers can increase the risk of upper GI bleed, and the aldosterone antagonist, spironolactone, is a commonly prescribed medication, which is an aldosterone antagonist. This can increase the risk of upper GI bleed. And there are other medications which can alter the presentation. I mean, they can turn the stool black without even bleeding. I mean, if the patient is taking iron pills, then their stool can be automatically black. It doesn't mean that he or she is bleeding. There are some other medications like that are bismuth, charcoal, licorice. Okay, so your medication history is very important.
ভাইয়া ওই নেক্সট
Yes.
স্লাইডে যাওয়ার আগে স্টুডেন্টদের থেকে একটা টেক্সট আসছে যে পাস্ট মেডিকেল হিস্ট্রিটা আরেকবার একটু এলাবোরেট করার জন্য, এবং আমার মনে হয় যে ওই থার্ড ইয়ারের স্টুডেন্টের জন্য এটা এই দুইটা খুব ইম্পর্টেন্ট স্লাইড। কারণ কেন প্রপারলি হিস্ট্রি নিতে হবে একটা ব্লিডিং এর পেশেন্টের, কজটা বের করার জন্য বা নেক্সট ম্যানেজমেন্ট ফিক্স করার জন্য ওই কোমরবিডিটিজ এর ইয়েটা আর কি আরেকবার একটু দেখাতে বলছে একজন স্টুডেন্ট।
This one?
হ্যাঁ, পাস্ট মেডিকেল হিস্ট্রি। হ্যাঁ,
Okay, past medical history. Okay, so we'll get to the cause of the upper GI bleeding. The most common cause is peptic ulcer bleeding peptic ulcer, and bleeding from the varices. These are the most common causes. There are other uncommon causes such as an outer-enteric fistula or angiodysplasia or vascular malformations. Those are the uncommon malignancy. These are uncommon causes, but the most common causes are varices and peptic ulcer disease. If the patient has liver disease or alcohol abuse problem, they may have varices, pre-existing varices that may bleed. If the patient has Helicobacter pylori infection history or NSAID use, or patient is antithrombotics, or patient is a smoker, then they may be prone to peptic ulcer disease, which may bleed. Basically, you will take the history like any other cases. I mean, smoking history, alcoholic history. These are the common practice in all the history taking classes. Okay. For any disease, you will have to, for any patient management, you have to take this history. And for this upper GI bleeding, the specific history that you will be taking is the history of liver disease, history of alcohol abuse, and for the management purposes, you'll take history of this coronary artery disease, I mean ischemic heart disease, pulmonary disease, renal disease, heart failure, and the patient has any thrombotic, any bleeding diathesis, any coagulopathies, any thrombocytopenia. There are conditions that can cause thrombocytopenia. There may be idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura. There may be the patient has PUD. On top of that, he or she developed a viral illness that can cause thrombocytopenia. Okay. যদি কোনো কথাবার্তা বুঝতে কষ্ট হয়, আমার মনে হয় যারা পার্টিসিপেন্ট আছে তারা যদি একটু আমাকে নক দেয় বা হচ্ছে চ্যাট বক্সে বলে, আমাদের মডারেটর যদি আমাকে জানায়, I can go and revisit some topics. Okay, it's not a problem. Okay. Symptom assessment. Okay, we have covered medical history, and now symptom assessment. I mean, you will have to, in history, there are some histories that might give clue to the underlying process that the bleeding occurs. Okay. If the patient has peptic ulcer, I mean, he or she may have upper abdominal pain. I mean, most of the peptic ulcer pain occurs in the epigastric region. I mean, she or he may have a long-standing epigastric pain history, or pain after eating meals, or pain several hours after eating the meal, depending on where the ulcer is, in the stomach or in the duodenum. If the ulcer is in the stomach, then the pain is immediately after taking food. If the ulcer is in the duodenum, then pain may occur several hours after, I mean, in the empty stomach. খালি পেটে যদি ব্যথা হয় তাহলে আমরা duodenal ulcer চিন্তা করতে পারি, যদি ভরা পেটে ব্যথা হয় তাহলে হচ্ছে গ্যাস্ট্রিক আলসার চিন্তা করতে পারি। এই ধরনের হিস্ট্রি যদি পেশেন্টের থাকে তাহলে আমরা, এবং সেই পেশেন্ট যদি পরবর্তীতে কখনো ব্লিডিং নিয়ে আসে আমাদের কাছে, then আমরা ধরে নিতে পারি যে this patient probably has a bleeding peptic ulcer. And then if the patient has odynophagia is pain on swallowing. খাবার খেতে গেলে যদি ব্যথা হয় তখন হচ্ছে সেটাকে আমরা ওডিনোফ্যাজিয়া বলি আর কি। যদি পেশেন্টের ওডিনোফ্যাজিয়া হিস্ট্রি থাকে, এটার অনেকগুলো কারণ আছে। আমার ইসোফেজিয়াল ক্যান্ডিডিয়াসিস, esophageal ulcer, esophageal malignancies, these are the one of the common causes. এইসব হিস্ট্রি যদি থাকে তখন আমরা চিন্তা করতে পারি যে ব্লিডিংটা হচ্ছে esophageal ulcer থেকে হচ্ছে। If the patient has a history of gastroesophageal reflux, the patient may have Barrett's esophagus that may turn into malignancy, which can bleed and which can present with hematemesis or even melena. If the patient has dysphagia, the swallowing a problem, there are multiple causes of dysphagia. We are not going into that in this lecture series. This is the term I was talking about, Mallory Weiss tear. This is if the patient has repeated vomiting and retching. Retching is the feeling and act of vomiting without actual content coming out. Okay, if the patient retches for some time and if the patient vomits profusely and vigorously for some time, then the esophageal mucosa is stressed in that process, and it ultimately can rupture. This is the term Mallory Weiss tear. Most of the time this doesn't require any management and the bleeding stops spontaneously, and by the time you take the patient to the endoscopy room or esophageal gastroduodenoscopy room, the ulcer is mostly healed. But in the cases that are persists, in the cases that the ulcer persists, you can clip the ulcer. Okay, there are endoscopic therapies that effect. Okay, and then if the patient has jaundice, abdominal distension, I mean ascites, these are the features of decompensated chronic liver disease. Decompensated cirrhosis. If the patient has decompensated cirrhosis, if the patient has stigmata of liver disease, I mean these histories are straightforward. People will tell you that আমার লিভারের সমস্যা আছে অথবা আমার সিরোসিস আছে অথবা আমার হেপাটাইটিস বি সিএলডি আছে, এই ধরনের হিস্ট্রি পেশেন্টরা নিজেরাই দিবে আর কি। তো তখন ইমিডিয়েটলি ফার্স্ট থিং দ্যাট উইল কাম টু মাইন্ড ইজ ভেরি সিম্পল। Okay, varices are the tortuous blood vessels that forms at the lower end of the esophagus and the stomach, and in chronic liver disease cases, due to the portal hypertension, gastric vessels are congested, and the term is called portal hypertensive gastropathy. These patients are more prone to bleeding. And then the patient has, if the patient has malignancy, then they may have history of dysphagia, early satiety, involuntary weight loss, and cachexia. I mean the classic features of malignancy. The patient may have scaphoid abdomen. The patient may be very emaciated. The patient may be cachexic. The patient may have early satiety and vomiting. Those are the features that will be present if the patient has a malignancy, and malignant tissue can bleed. And in case of severe bleeding, the patient may have features of severe bleeding.
র্যাচিংটা কাইন্ডলি আরেকবার একটু বলবেন, মানে র্যাচিংটা ওই যে ম্যালোরি ওয়েসিস টিয়ার।
র্যাচিং হচ্ছে ভমিটিং এর সময় যে হচ্ছে মানে যে অ্যাক্টটা হয়, ওই অ্যাক্ট উইদাউট অ্যাকচুয়াল ভমিটিং, এটাকে বলে হচ্ছে রেচিং। I mean the patient will feel যে বমি আসতেছে কিন্তু বমি হবে না আলটিমেটলি, এটা হচ্ছে রেচিং।
জি ভাই।
Okay. And the patient may have features and symptoms of severe bleeding. Those are orthostatic dizziness caused by orthostatic hypotension and hypovolemia. The patient may be confused. Patient may have chest pain if they are previously ischemic heart disease or coronary artery disease and things like that. The patient may have severe palpitations. Those are all the features of hypovolemia. And the patient may have cold and clammy extremities because of the hypoperfusion in the peripheries. Okay. Now you go on to do some physical examination. Physical examination, you will examine the patient like any other patient. You will go through the general examination and the system examinations. But the things that you need to mention, you need to give special attention to are resting tachycardia. If the patient has lost less than 50% of the blood, approximately, this is a rough estimate. If the patient has lost less than 50% of their blood volume, 15% এর কম যদি ব্লিডিং হয়, তখন শুধুমাত্র হচ্ছে রেস্টিং ট্যাকিকার্ডিয়া থাকবে উইদাউট এনি হাইপোটেনশন। Okay, and if the blood volume loss is more than 50%, then the patient develops orthostatic hypotension. Orthostatic hypotension means when you measure the blood pressure with the patient supine flat, then the blood pressure is normal, but there are more than 20 millimeter drop in systolic blood pressure when the patient takes an upright posture from that supine posture. So testing for the orthostatic hypotension can give you a clue how much of blood volume has been lost. And if more blood is lost, I mean, if more than 40%, 40% of the blood volume যদি লস হয় তখন সেই সব পেশেন্টের ক্ষেত্রে সুপাইন হাইপোটেনশন থাকবে। এখন এই হাইপোটেনশন এন্ড ট্যাকিকার্ডিয়া এটা একটা হচ্ছে মানে হচ্ছে সাবজেক্টিভ এস্টিমেশন। যদি একটা এলডারলি পেশেন্ট হয় ওই পেশেন্টগুলো খুব তাড়াতাড়ি হাইপোটেনসিভ হয়ে যাবে। যদি একটা ইয়াং অ্যাডাল্ট পেশেন্ট হয় তখন সেই পেশেন্টগুলো হচ্ছে হাইপোটেনসিভ হতে বেশ সময় লেগে যাবে, মোর দ্যান 40% আর মোর দ্যান 50% অফ দ্য ব্লাড ভলিউম লস না হলে তখন ওই পেশেন্টগুলোর হাইপোটেনশন হচ্ছে না, বিকজ অফ দ্য sympathetic activation that goes on in hypovolemic patient. They can maintain the blood pressure even if the patient is significantly hypotensive, significantly hypovolemic. এবং যখন ওই জিনিসটা ইনএডিকুয়েট হয় তখন আমরা কেবলমাত্র হচ্ছে সুপাইন হাইপোটেনশন পাই। And then you will have to do a rectal examination, digital rectal examination, to see if the blood is coming out per rectum. I mean, sometimes we see blood patients with rectal bleeding. I mean, rectal bleeding can be hematochezia, I mean, passage of fresh blood per rectum, and it can be melena. Melena is passage of altered blackish stool that is malodorous and that is sticky to the pen. So these things can be differentiated through a rectal examination. If the finger is stained with clotted blood, I mean, there are clots passing per rectum, I mean, the bleeding might be in the lower GI tract, not the upper GI tract. If the bleeding is blackish, then it can be small bowel bleeding, or the bleeding can be from further up in this intestinal tract. You will have to look for the stigmata of liver disease. Those are, I mean, there are a number of stigmata of the liver disease. Jaundice is one of them. Spider nevy is one of them. Ascites is one of them. There may be engorged and distended veins in the abdomen. There may be clubbing. There may be leukonychia. There may be flapping tremor. There are jaundice and ascites are the signs of decompensation. Okay. So you will have to look for the stigmata of the liver disease. Mostly, in most of the cases, the liver disease patients who presents with bleeding are straightforward. I mean, you have one look at the patient and you can tell that this patient is a patient of cirrhosis patient. I mean, decompensated cirrhosis is very obvious at the first sight, but it may not be the case in most of the cases. In a number of cases, so you'll have to look for them specifically to find those out. And finally, you will have to look for signs of perforation. I mean, if there is perforation of the hollow viscus and it erodes through a vessel, I mean, one of the arteries is gastroduodenal artery, which sits right behind the duodenum, right behind the first part of the duodenum. And if there is duodenal ulcer which erodes through that gastroduodenal artery, that can cause hematemesis and that can cause a perforation. I mean, if the patient also has coexistent perforation, then there will be board-like abdominal rigidity. There will be obliteration of the upper border of the liver dullness. There may be tenderness and rebound tenderness on examinations. So those are the signs that you will have to elicit if you want to recognize perforation. These perforation patients, these patients with perforation of the hollow viscus can present with hypovolemic shock, can present with septic shock. Okay, so the differentiation can be difficult, but the signs of perforation are very telling. I mean, if you have seen a perforation patient, if you have ever examined a hollow viscous perforation patient, you should be able to pick up most of the perforation cases by seeing the patient. Okay. So these are the signs that a hypovolemic patients may show. The early signs are low BP is not an early sign. Okay. This can be compensated by increased heart rate. The first sign that is found in these patients are resting tachycardia, and then the compensation still goes on. There is increased secretion of anti-diuretic hormones, and there is vasoconstriction. So the heart rate is increased, and there the pH falls down because of the anaerobic respiration that goes on, and because of the hypoperfusion that goes on. in a patient of hypovolemia. And then if the bleeding is continued, then there are progressive signs of tissue hypoxia, such as cold extremities, tissue hypoperfusion, and hypoxia. There may be cold extremities. All urine output is a very good indicator of the volume status of the patient. If the volume, if the urine output is less than 1 milliliter per kg per hour, then for example, for a 60 kg adult, he should produce 60 ml of urine per hour. If urine output is less than that, then you might think that the patient is hypovolemia. There may be CNS changes, like I said, agitation, confusion, and loss of consciousness. Those can happen, and low blood pressure. And then there are refractory signs. If the bleeding still continues and the management and volume resuscitation properly is not done, then the patient can go into multi-organ failure and acidosis, and then the patient may die. So here is a cartoon that says shock it to be baby. So I mean, in the shock, the early signs are the patient's blood pressure might be normal, but heart rate may be increased, skin color may be normal, skin temperature may be cold, and the patient may be anxious, and there may be deep sighing respiration. Okay, and if the bleeding continues, the late signs are systolic blood pressure drops below 90, heart rate increases, and heart rate becomes more weak and steady. The patient becomes pale, the peripheries becomes more cold and clammy. Patient may go into agitation or coma, and breathing, while increases the rate of the breathing, the patient is tachypneic, but the breathing becomes more shallow. Okay. So when a patient presents to you with hematemesis and melena, or simply just melena, there are some factors that can be predictive of an upper GI source. I mean, there are some features that can tell you that the bleeding might be from the upper gastrointestinal tract rather than the lower GI tract. I mean, there are differentiating. What is the differentiating point of upper GI and lower GI? The ligament of Treitz, Treitz. This is the suspensory ligament of the duodenum. It attaches at the duodenojejunal fracture, and bleeding from above this ligament is upper GI bleeding, and from below this ligament is lower GI bleeding. So if the patient has previous history of melena, I mean if the patient reports history of melena for several days prior to bleeding, I mean, if for example, if the patient has one episode of gastric bleeding into their stomach, that can pass up to several days as melena. Okay, those blood will be metabolized by the bacteria and the acids and the enzymes in the small bowel, and then come down to the rectum as altered blood. So the patient may have history of melena. Melena can be predictive of upper GI source. Melanic stool on examination. In the rectal examination, if your finger is stained with altered blood, I mean, blackish stool, that can give a clue that the bleeding may be from the upper GI. Blood or coffee grounds detected during nasogastric lavage. This nasogastric lavage is a procedure that is not commonly done. Nasogastric lavage is you put a nasogastric tube through the nose of the patient into up the stomach, and then you give fluid, and then you aspirate that fluid back. If that fluid is blood stained, if that fluid is reddish in color, then that may give a definitive clue that the bleeding is still there from the stomach. That gives us very conspicuous clue. Blood urea nitrogen. Burn creatinine ratio of more than 30. Blood urea nitrogen can be derived from the urea that we can do. We do not do burn commonly. We do urea level. Urea level can be done. If you divide the urea level by 2.8, you can give a burn value, and if you divide the burn value by creatinine, if the ratio is more than 30, then you can then the patient is it gives a clue that the patient has upper GI bleeding. Okay, so burn creatinine ratio more than 30, what does it mean? It means the urea is increased more than the creatinine in these patients. Why? Because as the bleed comes from the upper gastrointestinal tract, it passes through the small intestinal tract and through the colon and comes out through the rectum. In this passage, these blood are absorbed through the small intestinal tract. So blood is protein. So these proteins are absorbed, these proteins are broken down, and more urea is produced in the body. So in the GI bleed, the patient has urea, the urea level of the patient is more than normal patient. So that increases urea creatinine ratio and consequently bulk creatinine ratio. And then the patient is hypovolemic. So there is renal hypoperfusion. The amount of urea that is excreted by the urine is less than normal. So that is also another mechanism that urea increases in these patients. So the urea can be increased in these patients by two mechanisms. One is hypoperfusion, and another is the absorbed blood from the small intestinal tract. So if the bulk creatinine ratio is more than 30 at the initial presentation of the patient, it can give us clue that the bleed was from the upper GI source. Because if the bleeding was from the lower GI source, then there will be less blood available for absorption. I mean, the bleed has to come from the upper GI, and then through the passage of the small intestinal tract, it has to be absorbed for the urea to go up and the bulk creatinine ratio to make the bulk creatinine ratio more than 30. And if you use urea, the urea creatinine ratio has to be more than 100 to predict a source of upper gastric tract. Okay. And then the presence of blood clots in the stool makes upper GI source less likely. This is the thing that I was telling you before. If there are clots coming out the rectum, then the bleeding is probably not from the upper gastrointestinal tract, because upper GI bleed will not form clot in the rectum. Okay, it will be metabolized, it will be oxidized, but it will not be forming clots. If there is clots, then the bleed is coming from just upwards to the rectum. Okay. And then factors associated with severe bleeding included red blood cells detected during nasogastric lavage, which is this nasogastric lavage, and the color of the fluid coming out the nasogastric lavage, and tachycardia and hemoglobin level of less than 8 gram per deciliter. Okay. Now, what are the labs you are gonna advise for this patient? Routine hematology and biochemistry, complete blood count to give us an idea about that hemoglobin and the platelet count. Okay, platelet count is important because if the patient's platelet count is low, I mean an ITP patient, an idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpuric patient can bleed to the stomach if they also have coexisting platelet upset. Okay, so platelet count is also an important index to see in the CBC. And then creatinine, urea, and electrolytes you will have to see because of the reasons I have described here. And then the liver function test that will give us a clue if the level of decompensation of the patient's chronic liver disease or cirrhosis. Coagulation studies is important. If the patient has hereditary bleeding diathesis or thrombocytopenia, that may alter the coagulation status. The PT may increase. The INR, international normalized ratio, may be increased. If the patient is taking warfarin, then the PT and INR may be increased. So these are important indices to see. And the APTT, there are many bleeding diatheses that cause elevation of the APTT. Okay. Type screen and COSMAS. This is a very important test for any bleeding patient. If the patient is bleeding, you'll have to, at some point, you'll have to transfuse the patient probably. So you'll have to be ready for that. Blood grouping and cross-matching is very important for this patient. Venous blood lactate. This may give us a clue about the ischemia or hypoxia this patient is experiencing. As the hypoxia progresses, the patients the tissue doesn't get oxygen, doesn't get enough oxygen to continue aerobic respiration. There are anaerobic respirations and production of lactate. This patient ultimately becomes acidotic, and if this process is not stopped, the patient may die. I mean, the patient may go to a point where our resuscitation methods will not suffice. And then other tests, electrocardiograms and cardiac enzymes can be done in patients who are at risk of myocardial infarction. The risky patients are older adults. If the patient has a history of coronary artery disease, or if the patient has respiratory dyspnea. For these patients, we also order electrocardiograms and EKG and cardiac enzymes. Okay. So now the management. Okay, the management is basically before ordering labs, before taking all this history that I have told you, before properly assessing the patient, the resuscitation has to start because of the ABC of the ABCDE. It's the first thing that should be done. But for the presentation purpose, it has been put here. Okay. Okay, so IV access can be achieved through a peripheral venous cannulation or through central venous cannulation. I mean, if the patient is in hypovolemic shock, peripheral venous access can be very difficult. And if there are resources to have a CV line or central venous line done, so you can do that. The resuscitation effort is much more efficient if the patient has a venous, central venous line in place. But first thing you should have to do is put a place a two large bore, I mean 16G or larger, 16 or 18, two large bore peripheral IV cannula, two, not one, okay, in two different sites, and you will have to push fluids to those lines that you have placed. So this is the fluid resuscitation algorithm. This has been taken from the NICE 2013, but it still is valid. Using the ABCD approach, and then you go on to fluid resuscitation. First, if the patient is hypovolemic, hypotensive, then you give a fluid bolus of 500 ml of crystalloid solution containing sodium in the range of 130 to 144 millimole per liter. Crystalloids. Remember, crystalloids are the mainstay of therapy in hypovolemic patients. We should rarely consider colloid supplement. Okay. Resuscitation is the first thing that should come to your mind for resuscitation is the crystalloid solution. 500 bolus can be given, and then it can be repeated for up to 2000 ml. Okay, if it is still not sufficient, then you will have to give blood or transfuse the patient. And if the transfusion is not available right away, you can give volume expanders like dextran or albumin, things like that. But those have their own adverse effects. So it's better if you can resuscitate the patient with crystalloids and transfusion alone. That's why urgency is very important. Okay? So you'll have to send the blood for type and cross very early, and alert the blood bank to keep the blood ready, keep the packed red cells ready, and you'll have to also alert the gastrointestinal gastroenterology department and interventional radiology for if there is any endoscopy will be ultimately indicated in these patients or patient of FCPS. Okay. Now, transfusion. Okay. If the bleeding is severe and ongoing, you'll have to immediately transfuse blood products in 1:1:1 ratio of packed red cell, plasma, and platelet as for trauma patients. This is the protocol for massive transfusion. I mean, for transfusion, you'll have to remember the perks of transfusing blood products. Okay, if the patient requires more blood, that means the patient has been volume resuscitated with crystalloid, and we are giving only packed red blood cells. So these patients will be deficient of the coagulation factors, and the clotting factors and the proteins of the blood, and those will be diluted with the fluids and the red blood cells we are giving to the patient. So this patient will be deficient in, there will be some coagulopathy. These patients develop coagulopathy. So to prevent that, for massive transfusion, the packed red cell, plasma, and platelet are transfused in a 1:1:1 ratio. This is something that we call massive transfusion protocol. You can look it up, and you'll have to have a proper knowledge if you work in the ICU or where frequent transfusions are necessary. Okay. For hemodynamic instability, despite crystalloid resuscitation, I mean the patient's bleeding has stopped, but there is instability despite crystalloid resuscitation. You will have to transfuse 2 to 4 units of PRBC, packed red blood cells. If the hemoglobin is less than 8 in high-risk patients, such as older adult and patients with coronary artery disease, you'll have to transfuse 2 to 4 units of packed cells. And for other patients, in low-risk patients, the patients who does not have coronary artery disease, pulmonary disease, or the patients are not old enough, in these patients, if the hemoglobin falls below 7, even if the patient is hemodynamically stable, the volume status is normal, you'll have to transfuse 2 units of packed cells. You'll have to maintain the baseline hemoglobin that you should maintain is 7. But it's important that for a hypovolemic bleeding patient, the transfusion or resuscitation efforts are not directed by the hemoglobin level alone. You will have to look at the volume status of the patient. I mean, the oxygen carrying capacity of the red blood cells of the blood is 4 times over that is actually necessary in our body. So even if it's diluted with crystalloid solutions, even if we push only crystalloid and we do not transfuse the patient, and if that is adequate for, that is adequate for maintaining systolic blood pressure more than 90 millimeter of mercury, then we may not even need to transfuse the patient with packed cells. Okay, if the hemoglobin is more than 7 or 7 or more. If the hemoglobin is less than 7, then these patients are prone to tissue hypoxia, so we do not want that. Avoid overtransfusion with possible variceal bleeding. In patients with variceal bleeding, it has been shown in the studies that if you overtransfuse the patient, that can cause some adverse effects, so should be avoided. And for massive transfusion or the patients that require 4 or more units of packed red cells, we'll have to give some plasma, that is FFP, fresh frozen plasma, for coagulopathy, or after transfusing 4 units of PRBC. যদি 4টা ব্লাড 4 ব্যাগ PRBC যদি packed red cell যদি দেওয়া হয়, তারপরে একটা প্লাজমা দিতে হবে আর কি। এবং যদি থ্রম্বোসাইটোপেনিয়া থাকে কোএক্সিস্টেন্ট, তখন প্লেটলেট দেওয়া যেতে পারে আর কি, যদি প্লেটলেট মোর দ্যান 50,000 থাকে। or platelet dysfunction, platelet count কম এবং সাথে সাথে পেশেন্ট হচ্ছে ক্রনিক্যালি অ্যাসপিরিন খায় বিকজ অফ হিজ কোরোনারি আর্টারি ডিজিজ অর ইসকেমিক হার্ট ডিজিজ, ওই সব পেশেন্টকেও প্লেটলেট ট্রান্সফিউশন দেওয়া দরকার হতে পারে। Okay, so these are the principles of transfusion and fluid resuscitation. This is the mainstay of management of upper GI bleeding, and then there are pharmacotherapy and definitive management, that is endoscopy. So pharmacotherapy, there are not much medications that you can give to these patients to stop the bleeding. There are proton pump blockers. If the patient has prior history of peptic ulcer disease bleeding, if the patient has prior history of stomach gastric pain, then the bleeding might be due to peptic ulcer disease, and we will have to definitely consider definitely administer proton pump blockers to the patient. The dose is, we give esomeprazole or pantoprazole. If the bleeding is severe enough, we can give 80 milligrams. 1 ampoule contains 40 milligrams. We can give 2 ampoules stat and then 12 or 40 milligram IV. And then you can also give continuous infusion 8 milligram per hour. That is another way of giving proton pump blockers to these patients. And you will have to, if endoscopy is delayed more than 12 hours, then you will have to give another dose of proton pump blocker before the endoscopy is taken place. And then there are vasoactive medications such as somatostatin, octreotide, and terlipressin. There may be inotropic. Inotropic means the agents that constricts the blood vessels to maintain the blood pressure. Those are the agents that are called inotropics. The inotropic agents are dopamine, norepinephrine, vasopressin. There are others that we do not need to know right now. And those inotropic agents can be given temporarily if volume resuscitation with crystalloids is not enough and the blood after the relaxation. In the meantime, patient BP maintain করতে পারতেছে না আর কি। In that temporary time টাতে হচ্ছে vasoactive inotrope দিয়ে হচ্ছে পেশেন্টের বিপিটা more than 90 millimeter রাখা, systolic blood pressure more than 90 রাখা, এটা অ্যাটেন্ড করা দরকার হতে পারে আর কি। আর somatostatin, octreotide and terlipressin, এই জিনিসগুলো হচ্ছে পোর্টাল প্রেসারের উপরে এটার ইফেক্ট হচ্ছে খুবই কম, বাট ইট ক্যান হ্যাজ আদার ইফেক্টস দ্যাট মে বি বেনিফিশিয়াল ইন এ পেশেন্ট উইথ আপার gastrointestinal bleed. So we can give somatostatin or octreotide. Somatostatin is very short acting, so we can give octreotide 50 microgram stat IV push with 50 microgram continuous infusion per hour. And we can also give terlipressin. It's not used in all the countries, but in here we sometimes use terlipressin if it's a bleeding. It can be used if the patient is bleeding from the varices. Terlipressin is a vasopressin analog, longer acting analog of the vasopressin. So this can also be given as intermittent IV push or continuous infusion through the syringe pump. And then antibiotics. Antibiotics can be necessary in patients with variceal bleeding. If variceal bleeding occurs in patients with chronic liver disease or cirrhosis, and those patients are more prone to infection. So antibiotics have shown to improve outcome in these patients. Antibiotics may be considered or may be administered in patients with variceal bleeding. And then the prokinetics. Prokinetics are erythromycin, that's an antibiotic, can act as prokinetic, and metoclopramide. These prokinetics can be given before endoscopy to facilitate the visualization of the stomach, because the patient is bleeding from the stomach, so there will be lots of contents in the stomach that may hamper our visualization during the endoscopy. So these prokinetics can be administered prior to endoscopy to facilitate visualization. And if the visualization is not enough, even after administering prokinetics, then there might be a second look endoscopy might be necessary. Tranexamic acid is not necessary. This has not been shown to alter outcomes in studies, and it may also predispose patients to in patients who have thrombotic risk. I mean, older adults are in patients with malignancy. These patients are at thrombotic risk, or chronic debilitated patients who are bedbound. These patients are at thrombotic risk. If you give tranexamic acid to these patients, then the chances of venous thromboembolism is increased in these patients. So tranexamic acid has not been shown to improve outcome in upper GI bleeding cases. It's not routinely recommended in these patients. And then there are other issues. In terms of medication, there are other issues that you will have to consider, such as the patients taking antiplatelet therapies, the patients taking dual antiplatelet, clopidogrel and aspirin, and there are other now clopidogrel use করে দেয়, ticagrelor চলে আসছে, prasugrel চলে আসছে, এবং অনেকগুলো পেশেন্ট অনেক পেশেন্ট হচ্ছে এগুলো পায় আর কি। যদি পেশেন্টের হচ্ছে একটা বেয়ার মেটাল স্টেন্ট দেওয়া থাকে, ড্রাগ ইলিউটিং স্টেন্ট দেওয়া থাকে, পিসিআই যদি করা থাকে হার্টের উইথ পিভিএস, এই পেশেন্টগুলো হচ্ছে 1 বছর পর্যন্ত তাদের ডুয়াল অ্যান্টিপ্লেটেড থেরাপিতে থাকতে হবে আর কি। তো এই অ্যান্টিপ্লেটেড থেরাপি, অ্যান্টিপ্লেটেড ড্রাগ ক্যান ইনক্রিজ দ্য ব্লিডিং, বাট স্টপিং দ্য ড্রাগ ক্যান ইনক্রিজ দ্য চান্স অফ coronary thromboembolism. So you do not want that. So before stopping the dual antiplatelet therapies and other anticoagulants, you will have to consult with the cardiologist or the hematologist that have prescribed these medications. I mean, there is a condition if the patient has heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, the patient may bleed, and simultaneously the patient may have thrombosis within the body. And in cases of antiphospholipid antibody syndrome, the patient is prescribed anticoagulants. The patient is at thrombotic risk, and for anticoagulant may cause the bleeding. And if we stop the anticoagulant at the time, then the patient may have increased risk of thromboembolism. So you will have to check and balance. If the bleeding risk is more than normal, or if the bleeding is significant enough, you have to stop that drug. You will have to check and balance against the thrombotic risk and the bleeding risk. So this is a specialized decision, and you have to consult the hematologist for this things. Okay. And then this is the definitive management, endoscopy. Endoscopy, there are a number of endoscopic modalities. When should you perform this endoscopy? If the patient is hemodynamically unstable, you will have to perform the endoscopy as soon as you achieve hemodynamic stability, and as soon as the bleeding, as soon as the patient is deemed suitable to be taken to the endoscopy room. And if the patient is hemodynamically stable, then you can defer endoscopy, and you can perform it within 24 hours. Okay. So the modalities of treatment are thermal coagulation and hemoclip placement. These there are features in the endoscopy. When you do the endoscopy and go into the stomach to the scope, you can see different stigmas of recent hemorrhages. There is a classification system of Forest classification, where you classify 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, 2C, and 3 like this. The features that you see in the stomach or in the bleeding side, there may be active bleeding vessel, there may be non-bleeding visible vessel, there may be just a clean ulcer, there may be adherent clot overlying the ulcer, there may be just a pigmented spot. These are the things that are stigmata of recent hemorrhages, and there is a classification system of that's called modified or Forest classification or modified Forest classification, and the 1A, 1B that requires treatment, endoscopic treatment, and the latter one, the just clean ulcer with clean base without any bleeding manifestation. Those patients does not require any endoscopic therapy. Just pharmacotherapy with proton pump blockers and the preventive measurements can be sufficient in those patients. Okay. And the patients that require endoscopic therapy, the modalities are thermal. You do not need to go into details in these things. thermal coagulation, hemophilic placement, and combination therapy with epinephrine injection. I mean, these two, for this, for the peptic ulcer bleeding, thermal coagulation and hemophilic placement are the most commonly used therapies. And epinephrine injection can be used, but it should not be used in alone. Should be used in combination with thermal coagulation or hemophilic placement. I mean, you inject a patient with epinephrine at the site, at the bleeding site. Epinephrine, adrenaline is vasoconstrictor. It constricts the vessels and stops the bleeding. And then you place a hemophilic or you coagulate, you perform thermal coagulation in that patient. That can be a definitive treatment. If you cannot do that because of the hampered visualization, because of the bleeding, you'll have to go back there for a second look endoscopy, and you'll have to perform the definitive management if it's deemed necessary at the time. And there might be fibrin sealant and hemostatic nanopowder spray. These are newer. This can be used. I mean, it's up to endoscopy's description, up to the gastroenterologist's description. I mean, the person performing endoscopy or esophageal endoscopy, his preferred modality he will use. And if the patient is bleeding through the varices, then the definitive management strategies are endoscopic variceal ligation and sclerotherapy, endoscopic sclerotherapy. If the variceal ligation is not, this is the EVL is the most commonly used, and if it's not feasible at the time, it may be done later. But for the time being, sclerotherapy with ethanolamine oleate and sodium moruate, with these things, sclerotherapy can be done. Okay. And then now we're coming to the cause of upper bleeding. Cause-টা আমি শেষে রাখছি তার কারণ হচ্ছে most of the common causes আমরা তো হচ্ছে আগে বলেই দিছি আর কি। তারপরেও আর কিছু আনকমন কজ আছে, এই জন্য কজটা একটু দেখাটা একটু জরুরি। আমার আলসারেটিভ অথবা এরোসিভ লেশন যদি হয়, ডিউটেনাল অর গ্যাস্ট্রিক আলসার থাকতে পারে, ইসোফেজাইটিস থাকতে পারে, and gastritis or gastropathy অথবা duodenitis or duodenopathy থাকতে পারে। গ্যাস্ট্রোপ্যাথি, পোর্টাল হাইপারটেনসিভ গ্যাস্ট্রোপ্যাথি, কমন লিভার ডিজিজ, ক্রনিক লিভার ডিজিজ থাকতে পারে, ইসোফেজাইটিস, পিল ইসোফেজাইটিস হতে পারে, ক্যান্ডিডিয়াসিস থাকতে পারে, সাইটোমেগালোভাইরাস ইসোফেজাইটিস হতে পারে in a patient with AIDS. So these are the things that you need to consider at the back of your mind. Okay, and then there are features if you have the time later. এটা তো ভিডিওটা পরে available হবে আর কি। তো এখানে হচ্ছে যে cause directed bleeding manifestations and associated signs, symptoms, risk factors and endoscopic findings এখানে লেখা আছে আর কি। তো যতটুকু দেখা যায় আর কি। Okay. If the patient has portal hypertension secondary to cirrhosis or any other causes, those patients may have esophagogastric varices that can bleed. Ectopic varices can bleed. Ectopic varices, the varices that are not in the esophagus or stomach, in other places, that can bleed. Portal hypertensive gastropathy can also ooze blood, present with hematosis, and most commonly melanoma. There may be vascular lesions. These are not as common as the peptic ulcer or variceal bleeding, but these cases are also found. There may be angiodysplasia. There is a name Diolaphois lesion, in which there is tortuous artery that erodes to the mucosa and that may bleed frequently. This is Diolaphois lesion. Surgeons know about this very well. There is a condition called GAVE, gastric antral vascular ectasia, and there is blue rubber blade never syndrome. It's called Bean syndrome. These are very rare syndromes, but these are also present with upper GI bleeding. In ulcerative causes, there is an important thing to consider is Zollinger-Ellison syndrome. Zollinger-Ellison syndrome is a condition in which the stomach produces more acid. I mean, I'm sure you have heard the name of this thing, and it predisposes the patient to multiple ulcers in different parts of the gastrointestinal tract. I mean, not just gastric ulcer. There may be small intestinal ulcer. There may be ulcer in the Meckel's diverticulum and places like that. So those patients can present with upper gastrointestinal bleeding. And then it might be traumatic or iatrogenic. Mallory-Weiss syndrome I have discussed before. There may be foreign body ingestion. There may be post-surgical anastomotic bleeding from the marginal ulcer that I also have mentioned before. There may be post-polypectomy. I mean, patient may require endoscopy for the investigation of peptic ulcer pain, and the patient has a presented with bleeding, and you found a polyp in the stomach, and you have excised, snared the polyp, and then the patient might later present with bleeding if the endoscopy was done in inept hands. Okay. And there is a process called submucosal endoscopic resection, SMR, submucosal resection, for very early gastric cancer. I mean, these are the procedures that is practiced mostly in Japan and countries like that, where the screening process of the stomach cancer is very vigilant. And then those in those areas, very early gastric cancers can be the cancers that is only limited to the mucosa. Those can be detected, and if the cancer is only limited to the mucosa, then submucosal resection can be done. And after that, the patient will present with bleeding. Okay, endoscopic sphincterotomy. This can be okay. This is done in patients with, I mean, achalasia. Okay, so these patients will also present with bleeding. And there are other very uncommon causes of Cameron lesions that occurs in hiatal hernia patients, and there may be aortoenteric fistula. There are আমাদের এই দেশে তো হচ্ছে এই aortic aneurysm surgery করতে common না, but it's done fairly commonly in other places, and in those cases an aortoenteric fistula can develop. Okay, and then there may be upper GI tumors which may present with bleeding. There are miscellaneous causes and very rare, not to mention hemophilia and Hemosaccus pancreaticus. I have never heard of this name, Hemosaccus pancreaticus. Whatever it is, it may present with TMP. Okay, now I haven't mentioned probably. I have the risk stratification and scoring systems. I mean, where do you put the patient? In ward? Do you send the patient home? Do you put the patient in the ward, or do you put the patient in the ICU? Okay. There are two scoring systems. One is Rocal score and one is Glasgow GBS, Glasgow Blasford scoring system. So this GBS is used early, and the Rocal score is used after, and can be used after endoscopy. There are calculators online. I haven't shown the individual scoring systems. You can search it online, and there are online calculators. You just put the indices and they give you a result. If the score is 0, the patient can be sent home. If the score is more than 0, then endoscopy will be necessary. And if the score is 5, that is severe bleeding, then same to endoscopy, or endoscopy as soon as possible. As soon as the patient achieves hemodynamic stability. If the patient was hemodynamically unstable to begin with. And then there is this Rocal score. After a nice means UK. NICE recommends full Rocal score after endoscopy. Rocal score below 2 have a very low mortality, and 8 or higher have a mortality of more than 40%. When counseling the patients, patient counseling করার সময় এই স্কোরগুলো একটা মোটামুটি একটা ভালো আইডিয়া দিতে পারে যে পেশেন্টের আলটিমেটলি প্রগনোসিস কি হতে পারে। একটা জিনিস আমি যেটা বলি নাই এখানে, সেটা হচ্ছে আমার হিমোডাইনামিক মনিটরিং। একটা পেশেন্ট হিমোডাইনামিক্যালি আনস্টেবল, এই পেশেন্ট হাইপোভলিমিক, এই পেশেন্টের হচ্ছে these are the signs and symptoms that you will see in a patient. But if you are working in the ICU, I mean, most patients with severe GI bleed will end up being in the ICU. And in ICU, you have access to more invasive monitoring. What are the more invasive monitorings? You can have arterial line placed here, through which you can see the blood pressure, instantaneous reading of blood pressure, and through that you can attach it to complex monitors that can give you different values such as stroke volumes. It can measure stroke volume. It can measure the variation of the stroke volume, pulse pressure variation, stroke volume variation. This can be, and passive leg raising test. This can be monitored in these patients, and this might be necessary in patients who are more susceptible to volume overload, such as I have mentioned here, the patients with renal disease or heart failure. These patients are elderly adults. These patients are very prone to volume overload risk. You need more invasive monitoring in these patients. So this is a separate topic, but I have just touched on it here so that you can look it up later. Okay, so that's basically more or less everything that I think you should know about an upper GI bleeding. And not after this presentation you will be able to manage if you do not study it after this presentation ends. So I have just touched on most of the topics, and I haven't been able to give in more details discussion about a lot of the things that I have mentioned, but it's your responsibility to look it up and be a pro in this sector. Okay, so that's it. That's the end of the presentation. Okay, so now questions. Do you have you gotten any questions?
ভাইয়া ট্রান্সফিউশন ম্যানেজমেন্ট একটু আরেকবার বলবেন?
ট্রান্সফিউশন ম্যানেজমেন্ট হচ্ছে যদি আমি একটা পেশেন্ট হচ্ছে সিভিয়ার অনগোয়িং ব্লিডিং থাকে, তো আমি এটা ধরে নিতে পারি যে এই পেশেন্টের এবং হাইপোটেনসিভ হেমোডাইনামিক্যালি আনস্টেবল থাকে পেশেন্ট, তো আমার ব্লিডিং স্টপ করতে সময় লাগবে, এক নম্বর কথা। দুই নম্বর হচ্ছে যে এই পেশেন্টের হেমোডাইনামিক স্টেবিলিটি নিয়ে আসতে হবে আর কি। তো এইসব ক্ষেত্রে হচ্ছে আমার ওই ম্যাসিভ ট্রান্সফিউশন প্রোটোকলটা হচ্ছে ফলো করতে হয়। এটা তো 1:1:1, আই মিন পিআরবিসি, প্লাজমা এন্ড প্লেটলেট, 1 ইউনিট পিআরবিসি, 1 ইউনিট প্লাজমা, 1 ইউনিট প্লেটলেট, এই রেশিওতে হচ্ছে আমি ট্রান্সফিউজ করতে শুরু করবো আর কি। সাথে সাথে ট্রান্সফিউশনের আরো যে হ্যাজার্ড গুলো থাকে, যেমন হচ্ছে হাইপোক্যালসেমিয়া হতে পারে, আপনার এভরি 3 ইউনিটস অফ পিআরবিসি ট্রান্সফিউশন উই গিভ 1 অ্যাম্পুল অফ ক্যালসিয়াম গ্লুকোনেট। তো এই জিনিসগুলো একটু মাথায় রাখতে হবে আর কি। সাথে সাথে এই পেশেন্টগুলো হচ্ছে কোয়াগুলোপ্যাথি থাকতে পারে আর কি। এই কোয়াগুলোপ্যাথি প্রিভেনশন করার জন্যই বেসিক্যালি এইসব মেজারমেন্ট আর কি। প্লাস ইফ ইউ ডু নট perform the massive transfusion protocol, পেশেন্টের হচ্ছে ব্লিডিং স্টপ অর হেমোডাইনামিক ইনস্টেবিলিটি এখনো আছে, ক্রিস্টাল আর্ট দিয়ে হচ্ছে না, তখন আমি হচ্ছে ওই প্যাকড রেড সেল দিয়ে আনটিল hemodynamic stability আসে। তো আমি every 4 unit of packed cell transfusion will have to give 1 unit of FFP and 1 unit of platelet. And then 1 unit of FFP means 250 ml of FFP. The normal dose of FFP is 10 to 20 milliliters per kilogram per dose. মানে আমরা যদি একটা 60 কেজি অ্যাডাল্ট থাকে, তাহলে এক ডোজের জন্য হচ্ছে যদি 15 ধরি, তাহলে 900 ml আমার হচ্ছে FFP লাগবে। 900 ml যদি একটা ইউনিটে থাকে হচ্ছে 250 ml, so 900 ml means approximately আমার 4 units of FFP. ওকে, এটা যদি থ্রম্বোসাইটোপেনিয়া থাকে less than 50,000, then we will consider giving platelets before even it's needed. আর আরেকটা হচ্ছে যে এন্ডোস্কোপির ক্ষেত্রে একটা জিনিস বলা হয় না, সেটা হচ্ছে এন্ডোস্কোপি আমি কখন করব না, যদি আমার থ্রম্বোসাইটোপেনিয়া থাকে, যদি আমার অল্টার্ড কোয়াগুলেশন প্রোফাইল থাকে, যেমন হচ্ছে আমার যদি আইএনআর এর পিটি অনেক বেশি থাকে, পেশেন্ট টেকিং ওয়ারফারিন, পেপটিক আলসার ব্লিডিং হচ্ছে, সেই পেশেন্টের আমি হচ্ছে এন্ডোস্কোপি করব কি করব না। ওয়ারফারিনের পেশেন্টের হচ্ছে আইএনআর অল্টার্ড থাকতে পারে। তো এইসব পেশেন্টের ক্ষেত্রে ওই ওয়ারফারিন যে আমার হচ্ছে আমার ওয়ারফারিনের যে ওভারডোজ হচ্ছে, এটার জন্য আবার আলাদা একটা ম্যানেজমেন্ট স্ট্র্যাটেজি লাগবে। দুই নাম্বার হচ্ছে আমি যখন এন্ডোস্কোপি করব, তখন আমার এই প্লেটলেট কাউন্ট এন্ড হচ্ছে আমার কোয়াগুলেশন প্রোফাইল দেখে যদি আইএনআর 2.5 এর উপরে থাকে, এন্ডোস্কোপি ইজ নট অ্যাডভাইসড রাইট অ্যাওয়ে। এটা হচ্ছে আমরা ওই ফ্রেশ ফ্রোজেন প্লাজমা অর কোসোমিন কমপ্লেক্স কনসেন্ট্রেট অথবা হচ্ছে ভিটামিন কে, এই জিনিসগুলো দিয়ে আইএনআর হচ্ছে লেস দ্যান 2.5 নিয়ে আসলে তারপরে হচ্ছে আমাদের এন্ডোস্কোপিটা অ্যাডভাইসেবল। And then endoscopy হচ্ছে up to 20,000, platelet count হচ্ছে 20,000 per microliter যদি থাকে, তখন endoscopy advisable, but less than that it's not advisable. But যদি হচ্ছে কম থাকে প্লেটলেট, তখন একটা অ্যাপারেটিক প্লেটলেট ট্রান্সফিউজ করে তারপরে হচ্ছে সেই পেশেন্টের এন্ডোস্কোপির জন্য these are the things that you should be taking in mind. কারণ হচ্ছে গ্যাস্ট্রোএন্টারোলজিস্ট যখন আসবে, সে বলবে আমি এন্ডোস্কোপি করব, এন্ডোস্কোপির জন্য পেশেন্ট রেডি করব। As a resident or as a junior physician, you'll have to take care of this associated stuffs. I mean, if the patient coagulation profile is altered or not, if the patient's platelet count is normal or not, if the patient is volume resuscitated enough or not. These are the things that you should be taking care of, and you should be very able to very adept in taking care of. Otherwise, the patient will have adverse outcomes. Okay.
ভাই হিমোগ্লোবিন যদি 8 এর কম হয়, তাহলে আমরা 2 থেকে 4 ইউনিট হচ্ছে ট্রান্সফিউজ করব, আর হচ্ছে 7 এর কম হলে 2 ইউনিট। ভাই এটা কেন?
আচ্ছা, 8 and 7 এই কাট অফ হচ্ছে আমার ডিপেন্ড করবে হচ্ছে পেশেন্টের কোমরবিডিটির উপরে। যদি কোমরবিড কন্ডিশন থাকে, যেমন হচ্ছে পেশেন্টের ইসকেমিক হার্ট ডিজিজ আছে, পেশেন্টের পালমোনারি ডিজিজ আছে, এল্ডারলি পেশেন্ট, এইসব পেশেন্টগুলো হচ্ছে মোর প্রোন টু হাইপোক্সিয়া। হ্যাঁ, তো এই মোর প্রোন টু হাইপোক্সিয়া থাকলে এইসব পেশেন্টের হিমোগ্লোবিন আমরা অ্যাটলিস্ট 8 রাখবো। তো এই অ্যাটলিস্ট 8 রাখার জন্য হচ্ছে আমার যে কয়টা ট্রান্সফিউজ করতে হবে, সে কয়টা ট্রান্সফিউজ করতে হবে। কারণ পেশেন্টের ইনিশিয়াল হিমোগ্লোবিন যদি থাকে হচ্ছে 4, ওই পেশেন্ট অবভিয়াসলি অনেক বেশি শকে আছে আর কি। সো ভলিউম রিসাসিটেশনের পরে ওই পেশেন্টের আমার মোর দ্যান we can it may be necessary to perform the massive transfusion protocol, but যদি সেটা না হয় আর কি, তখন ওই মোস্টলি 2 to 4 ইউনিটস ইনিশিয়ালি আমরা দিয়ে দেখবো, যেটা 7-এর উপরে উঠে কিনা বা 8-এর উপরে উঠে কিনা, ডিপেন্ডিং অন দ্য কমরবিডিটি অফ দ্য পেশেন্ট। যদি নর্মাল পেশেন্ট হয় উইদাউট কমরবিডিটিস, নট এলডারলি অ্যাডাল্ট, এইসব পেশেন্টের ক্ষেত্রে হচ্ছে আমাদের হিমোগ্লোবিন যদি 7 থাকে, দ্যাটস মোর দ্যান এনাফ ইফ দ্য পেশেন্ট ইজ ভলিউম, ইফ দ্য পেশেন্টস ভলিউম ইজ অ্যাডিকুয়েট। তো আমার হচ্ছে হিমোগ্লোবিন দিয়ে আমরা এইটা ডিটারমিন করব না, ডিটারমিন করব হচ্ছে ভলিউম দিয়ে। Even if the patient is hemodynamically stable, the volume status is okay, but the hemoglobin is less than 7, we'll have to transfuse the patient at that point. Okay.
জি ভাইয়া।
থ্যাংক ইউ সো মাচ ভাইয়া। আর কি কারোর কোনো প্রশ্ন আছে? যারা আছে চাইলে এখন প্রশ্ন করে ফেলতে পারেন।
ল্যাব ডায়াগনোসিসে টাইপ, স্ক্রিন আর ক্রস ম্যাচটা ভাই যদি আরেকটা একটু বলতেন।
টাইপ স্ক্রিন ক্রস ম্যাচ, এটা তো হচ্ছে আমরা যে ব্লাড টাইপ টেস্ট করি, যেটা এবিও এন্ড আরএইচ টাইপিং।
ও আচ্ছা আচ্ছা,
কি ব্লাড গ্রুপিং, সেটা ব্লাড গ্রুপ কোনটা, কারণ আমার তো হচ্ছে ব্লাড গ্রুপ ম্যাচড হতে হবে আর কি ট্রান্সফিউশন দেওয়ার জন্য। বাট তারপরেও যদি হচ্ছে আমার ওই ম্যাচ ট্রান্সফিউশন যদি না পাওয়া যায়, উই ক্যান ট্রান্সফিউজ ও নেগেটিভ ব্লাড ইফ ইটস দ্যাট নেসেসারি, যে ট্রান্সফিউশন না দিলে পেশেন্ট মারা যাচ্ছে এবং আমার হাতে হচ্ছে পেশেন্টের ব্লাড গ্রুপ বি নেগেটিভ অথবা বি পজিটিভ, আমার হাতে বি পজিটিভ ব্লাড এই মুহূর্তে নাই, উই ক্যান ট্রান্সফিউজ ও নেগেটিভ ব্লাড। That itself is rare.
ওকে ভাই।
Any other questions? Do we have any other questions?
নো ভাইয়া। ভাইয়া আমাদের একটা পোল আছে, আপনি ভাইয়া আপনি হোস্ট এই সেশনে, আপনি এটা শেয়ার করতে পারবেন ভাইয়া। এটা হচ্ছে শেয়ার স্ক্রিনে ভাইয়া আশেপাশে আশেপাশে পোল একটা অপশন আছে, এটা মেবি ভাই আপনাকে শো করছে।
আচ্ছা, লঞ্চ করব?
জি ভাইয়া।
লঞ্চ করব?
জি ভাইয়া।
পোলটা লঞ্চ হয়ে গিয়েছে। যারা পার্টিসিপেন্টস আছেন তারা সবাই প্লিজ আপনাদের মতামতটা দিয়ে ফেলেন। ভাইয়া আপনি কি আমাদের অডিয়েন্সের উদ্দেশ্যে আর কিছু অ্যাড করতে চান?
অডিয়েন্সদেরকে আমি কাউকে চিনি না, বাট যেটা বলতে চাই সেটা হচ্ছে যে একটা প্রেজেন্টেশন উইল নেভার বি এনাফ ফর লার্নিং এ টপিক। এইটার উপরে হচ্ছে যদি আরেকটু পড়াশোনা করা হয়, যদি আরেকটু জানাশোনা করা হয়, I mean you will have to be vigilant all the time about everything. যে upper GI topic, এটা হচ্ছে you will have to have a very clear idea about transfusion medicine. Okay? Otherwise you'll not be able to transfuse the patient properly. ওই ট্রান্সফিউশনের সাইড ইফেক্টের জন্য পেশেন্ট মারা যেতে পারে, তাই না? পেশেন্টের অ্যানাফাইলাক্সিস হতে পারে, ওইগুলা কিভাবে ম্যানেজ করতে হবে, তো সবকিছু একটা প্রেজেন্টেশন নিয়ে আসা সম্ভব হয় না। পেশেন্টের হাইপোভলিমিয়া, পেশেন্টের কি কি দেখলে আমি বুঝতে পারবো পেশেন্টের স্টিল হাইপোভলিমিক, পেশেন্টের ক্যাপিলারি রিফিল টাইম, পেশেন্টের স্কিন কালার, পেশেন্টের হার্ট রেট, পেশেন্টের ব্লাড প্রেশার, পেশেন্টের ইউরিন আউটপুট, পেশেন্টের সেন্সোরিয়াম, পেশেন্টের কালার অফ দ্য স্কিন, all of these things you will have to know. তারপরে হচ্ছে পেশেন্টের ভলিউম স্ট্যাটাস মনিটরিং। যদি একটা পেশেন্ট হচ্ছে ক্রিটিক্যাল, একটা ডক্টর যদি ক্রিটিক্যাল কেয়ার সেটিং এ কাজ করতে চায়, সেক্ষেত্রে তার হচ্ছে কি কি ইনভেসিভ মনিটরিং আছে ভলিউম স্ট্যাটাস দেখার জন্য, এই জিনিসগুলো জানাটাও খুবই জরুরি। তো এরকম মাল্টিপল কোরিলেশন করে করতে পারলে, কোরিলেশনাল পড়াশোনা করতে পারলে আলটিমেটলি you will get something out of this thing. আদারওয়াইজ হবে না। কারণ হচ্ছে শুধুমাত্র আমি ব্লিডিং হয়েছে ব্লাড দিব, তারপর হচ্ছে এন্ডোস্কোপিতে পাঠিয়ে দিব, জাস্ট এইভাবে হচ্ছে you will not be able to be a very good doctor. এটা হচ্ছে একটা, you can be a very good cleric but not more than that. তো এইরকম কোরিলেশন করে প্রত্যেকটা জিনিস হচ্ছে করতে হবে। একটা টপিক একটা টপিক অলওয়েজ pulls on many different topics. You'll have to be vigilant about all this.
ওকে, থ্যাংক ইউ সো মাচ ভাইয়া। আমি সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ জানাতে চাই, তার যারা আমাদের সেশনে ছিলেন সকল পার্টিসিপেন্টসকে ধন্যবাদ জানাতে চাই এবং সব সবচেয়ে বেশি আপনাকে ধন্যবাদ জানাতে চাই আপনার এই মূল্যবান সময়টা দেওয়ার জন্য আমাদেরকে। ইট ওয়াজ আ ভেরি ইনফরমেটিভ সেশন এবং ইট ওয়াজ আ লট টু টেক। এবং যেরকম ভাইয়া বলেছেন যে এটাই এখানে শেষ না, ইটস আ হিউজ টপিক, হিউজ থিং। সো থ্যাংক ইউ সো মাচ ভাইয়া আমাদেরকে সময়টা দেওয়ার জন্য। এবং অ্যাক্সিসে যারা আজকে সেশনে ছিলেন তাদেরকে তো ধন্যবাদ। এবং অ্যাক্সিস আপনাদের জন্য আরো বেশি সেশনস নিয়ে আসবে। আমাদের যে সিজনটা চলছে বিল্ডিং দ্য রাইট ফাউন্ডেশন, এটা বিভিন্ন এপিসোডে আপনারা আরো বেশি নলেজেবল অ্যান্ড ট্যালেন্টেড মেন্টরদেরকে পাবেন, যারা যারা আমাদের জন্য তাদের মূল্যবান সময় থেকে একটু সময় বের করে আপনাদেরকে সাহায্য করতে চাচ্ছেন। সো থ্যাংক ইউ সো মাচ আজকের সেশনের জন্য। আপনাদের সাথে হোস্ট হিসেবে ছিলাম আমি সাইমা সামিন জাহান মুহূর্ত ফ্রম সাপোর্ট ইন্টার কলেজ এন্ড হসপিটাল। আজকের মতন শেষ করছি। শুভরাত্রি।